Thank you, Chris. That song really touched me. I thought, oh, am I going to be able to do this today? It's a subject I feel very passionate about. And I want to thank Ron for agreeing to be lay leader today. Ron and Nancy have been a regular part of our Civil Conversations monthly Zoom meetings, so it means a lot that you're doing this today, Ron. So good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to those in the sanctuary and those online. My name is Darby Fetzer, and I've been a member of UUCC for 5+ years. On this Memorial Weekend, I'd like to start by acknowledging the people who have served in our armed forces. In my family, my father-in-law served as lieutenant in the Navy in World War II. My father was a captain in the Navy and my brother a sergeant in the Air Force. Thank you, veterans and active military members. We are grateful for your service. Today, I've been invited to talk about civil conversations, again, something that I hold very dear to my heart. It's an ongoing monthly Zoom program that Miriam Epschkamp and I have been facilitating for the past 3 years. Sometimes Reverend G facilitates as well. Marcia Leah, an active Civil Conversations Zoom participant, and I have worked together to coordinate today's program. A little later, Marcia will share how the Civil Conversations group has impacted her life. A little personal history. Healthy and sometimes heated dinner table conversations were always on the menu at our house, whether that was me growing up or when raising our 3 daughters. The idea of engaging in contentious topics of discussion was not new to me, and I welcomed it. Then about 5 years ago, I noticed a palpable shift in how people were talking, or rather not talking to one another. This correlated with what was happening 2 presidential elections ago. According to news sources, presidential candidates were not using the term opponent when talking about the other party's candidate, but rather enemy, evoking a dehumanizing, divisive, and hostile emotional response, which had rippling effects throughout the nation. For myself, I realized after that election I could not make myself talk to certain neighbors with opposing political views. I had the same response when COVID hit, unable to break the mental barrier to approach neighbors of differing political viewpoints because COVID itself had become a political issue. If I was feeling this way, and I'm about expanding loving community, I knew there were others who felt a new sort of disconnection and division. The question became, how can we intentionally connect with others who share differing perspectives? One approach, civil conversations. The monthly Zoom program started after a Civil Conversations presentation I'd provided at a Sunday service, like this, during COVID and over Zoom. I'm an emotional intelligence workshop facilitator for Holton & Associates Wellness. I hold 4 certifications in emotional intelligence and was glad to offer this program to our spiritual community. Emotional intelligence, by the way, simply means being smarter with feelings. Turns out it's one thing to learn about civil conversations and quite another to have them. Congregants wanted more education, more sharing of experiences, and more practice. Hence, our monthly Civil Conversations Zoom gathering was born. We have learned much over 3 years, and we're mindful to bring newcomers along with us. As Miriam says, we're building the plane as we go. Please hang with me now in the aircraft hangar as we further explore this topic using planes as our metaphor. First slide, please. Our Civil Conversations group 3 years ago started building the plane by looking at the control panel, the brains of the operation. What were the many ways our control panels or brains have been programmed that influence our perspective on issues? For this, Miriam used a Jamboard. Next slide. Looks like a board of sticky notes, and collectively, we came up with a lot. We learned we are not born with our viewpoints, but are greatly affected by outside factors. This list is not exhaustive, but notes many ways our opinions are formed. Our viewpoints are influenced by our peers, our upbringing, where we live, by the news we listen to and watch, by the social media we engage with, whether or not we are involved with conspiracy theory thinking, the Saturday movies we watch, our personality, which is related to how we were born, our family dynamics, the culture in which we were brought up, our communities, at work, on Sunday morning, and within our homes. Next slide, please. We've discovered what gives us thrust to move us forward in civil conversations. Our propeller is our set intention. We've found that when we come from a place of loving curiosity, it encourages the conversation to propel us smoothly forward. Next slide. Test flights of our civil conversations plane prototype may encounter some rough conditions. An emotional storm may arise, requiring us to fly IFR, which is flying with instruments only. In other words, using emotional intelligence to navigate. If we notice we're feeling triggered, for example, that's a good time to get quiet and take a few deep breaths and recenter. Next slide. After landing the plane, reviewing what went well in our civil conversation and exploring adjustments we'd want to make in future flights. I don't have a slide for this next one, but regarding takeoffs, you may be wondering about the civil conversation topics in our flight plan. Here are a few of the subjects covered to date. Universal income, pronoun usage, where we heard from Reverend G on the pronouns they, them, their. Socialized healthcare in Canada, where Marcia Leah brought friends on Zoom for a Q&A, residents of Canada who winter in Florida. We talked about cancel culture. We talked about nuclear energy with Sean Connors, an expert on the topic. Also, critical race theory, implicit bias, wokeness. As you can imagine, it's a great opportunity to learn about an abundance of topics. More recently, we've taken our cue from Sunday services. So in 2024, we've had topics like strengthening our civil conversations muscles. Carol Higgins inspired this. This is practicing lead-ins. Instead of just responding, actually starting the conversation. So lead-ins related to our personal beliefs. We also had going against the grain, where we got vulnerable with each other. And we brought to the table a viewpoint on a topic that would likely set us apart from the UU community. And then last month, we heard from our daughter, Della Fetzer. The topic was an intergenerational conversation, and she poked the bear. She really prompted us, and we had some heated discussion. It was very healthy. And now Marcia Leah will share how the Civil Conversations group has affected her life.
Well, good morning. I'd like to say I'm happy to be here, but I'm terrified. And as a child, I was afraid of the dark. I was absolutely certain that there was a fourth dimension. And in that fourth dimension lived critters. And they would grab me by the ankles and pull me into the fourth dimension under my bed. Yeah, fear can be paralyzing, whether it's fear of the dark or fear of critters, real or imagined. But, as you get older, you begin to realize that knowledge is power. And it's very important to understand that if you learn something, you won't be afraid of it. I'm still afraid of being up here, but nevertheless. And so that's why I got excited with Darby offering the opportunity to learn about civil conversations. After all, it's all about relationships. And as Darby mentioned, getting to know one another is really the purpose, a loving relationship. So I wanted to learn how to have a civil conversation because most importantly, I wanted to learn how to have a civil conversation with my daughter. You think your daughter pokes the bear. So anyway, Darby was a great instructor, and she taught us all of the principles and how to use a civil conversation. Practice, practice, practice. So I wasn't so successful at this, so I thought, gee whiz, what can I come up with that would help me during this plane that's out there in the storm? And I came up with 3 R's, the first one being recall. I had to recall what I learned. For example, I had to recall that it isn't about trying to change someone. I had to recall that I needed to listen with my heart. I had to recall that I didn't need to come back with a comeback. I had to listen, truly listen. Isn't easy. The next R was about relationships. And the ultimate reason for engaging in the conversation is to build that relationship, to build a loving relationship. So I try to calm myself and appreciate the other person. I try to listen with my heart. I try to find common ground to help me have a better understanding of that person's point of view. After all, if I have my point of view, they should have the right to have their point of view. I want to create a relationship and tear down that wall. And when a fire ignites in the belly, that's when I would try to breathe. And remember, the reason for this conversation is to build that relationship. Recall, relationship, and the third R stands for replay. As I mentioned, this isn't easy. Like any skill, it takes practice. So one of the things I used to tell parents when we talked about parent effectiveness training is it takes practice, and when you are interacting with your child and things go wrong or right, replay it so that the next time you can do better. Was it a success? Was it a failure? What went well? What could I do better next time? So not too long ago, my daughter came for a visit and I said, oh yeah, okay, here we go. I am going to practice with the person with whom I have the most difficulty, right into that storm. So I said to her, Nia, did you hear what happened in Alabama? Now, that alone would set the fire because I know that her only source of the news is social media. No, she said, I've been on the road a couple days. What's happened? Well, I said, Alabama has declared that an embryo is a human. To which she replied, an embryo's never turned out to be anything else. It never became a dog or a pig. Now, this was said in such a tone that we would be off and running. The fight would be on. Take a breath. Looking for common ground, I said, you're absolutely right. Nobody ever gave birth to anything other than a human being. And some people would even say that at the moment of conception, that embryo was infused with a soul and became a child of God, right? She nodded. Oh, I could tell, we're on common ground. Hallelujah, no fight. So I said, but Nia, here's the problem. Not everybody would agree with us. And I don't know what science said, but their operative word is become. She says, come on, it's not unclear. An embryo is a human being. And, well, at least we know it's going to be born a human. What else would it be? Uh-oh, another match to the fire. Oh, well, I got to blow that one out. So I said, "Oh, yeah, I agree. But we know for a fact that that embryo will become a human. But Nia, here's the problem. The operative word here is become. When is the embryo actually a human?" I said, "I'm not sure what science says, but I know for sure that there are a lot of people that don't agree with us. Many people think that the embryo isn't human until it's viable outside the womb. And there are even some that don't think it's human until it's born and breathing." At this point, her husband stepped in. Now, he didn't take Darby's class. He said, "So let's say that I was in an accident and I became brain dead. Would you say that I'm still a human?" She goes, "Yeah, of course." He says, well, then you can't pull the plug because I'm a human and that would be murder." So I went back to the problem. I said, here's the problem that I want to really get to, Nia. Since people are not in agreement, and neither is science, who gets to decide? Do you? Does each person? How about a committee? The doctor? A government? Alabama? What do you think? Well, there was a lot more to this conversation, and I won't go there, but I want to replay what happened. I don't think we ever decided who gets to decide. The point is, we talked. We listened. I learned something about her. Maybe she learned something about me. So when I replayed this conversation, I realized, well, maybe for the first time, there was no shouting. There was no attacks. There were no insults. There was no trying to convince that the other person was wrong and I was right. Now I know I'm right. So, and there's not two people that are right, but I didn't try to convince. Yay, success! Maybe it wasn't perfect, but this was probably the first time that I had a civil conversation with a family member, with my daughter, that didn't turn into a fight. So I say to Darby, I'm no longer afraid to try to have a civil conversation and to even initiate one. Thank you.
That's amazing, Marcia. Thank you. Yes, with family, we can be the most challenged. I have also learned a lot through our time together with civil conversations. And one specific point is I've learned more about nuclear energy and have become a proponent and advocate for this, especially over the recent year. So let's get crystal clear about what a civil conversation is, because you'll be having one here this morning in a little bit. It's dialogue between two or more people that intends to build a greater understanding. Participants don't have to agree. What matters is the act of listening to understand the other's perspectives. Resolution is not the intended outcome. So why have a civil conversation? To truly learn about others' perspectives, right? Because we are an open-minded community. To allow ourselves a voice that may be contrasting, to dispel the notion of other and see the whole person, to build trust in ourselves and others that we may believe differently and still care about each other and be in community together. Collectively, we came up with a Civil Conversations group purpose, and that is, with a curious and loving heart, we will engage in civil conversations with family, friends, and others to authentically build a more beloved community. So now we'll talk about how to have a civil conversation in preparation to engage in our own. Next slide, please. What it takes to have a civil conversation, first of all, is bravery. Yes, because it can be scary. Many of us may have been taught, we don't talk about those things. That can go way back in our history. So bravery to engage a politically, potentially, and sometimes politically contentious topic, residing in a place of incredible curiosity, suspending judgment, and boy, that's a hard one. Engaging humility, recognizing that we don't know everything, listening deeply, engaging differences constructively. If you find common ground, that's wonderful. That can really help to build that mutual respect. Emptying ourselves from agenda and outcomes, and this is probably the hardest one to do, letting go of the need to be right. And preparing ourselves to be transformed. Next slide. The most important part of a civil conversation is our tone and voice. Listening is more important than what we say. Next slide. What can short-circuit a civil conversation is our own emotional state. Are we responding by asking curious questions? Continue, please. Continue. Or are we reacting out of this place of righteous indignation? Next slide. And let's get right down to it. Rules of engagement. Listen with curiosity, speak from your own experience, connect with respect, be kind. And then something we came up with, or more specifically Marcia Leah came up with, is if something's been said during the course of the conversation that hurts you or diminishes the humanity of another, feel free to say ouch or time out and explain why those words were hurtful. All right, next slide. So, in a minute, what I'm going to have you do is pair up with another, and then you will take a minute to decide which of these 5 topics of conversation that you will engage in. And then you'll each have 2 minutes to share your perspective, and then I'm also going to give you a minute, and I'm sorry I didn't share this with the tech team in advance. I'm going to give you a minute to debrief how that was. So the topics are, Marcia and I came up with these together. Facebook, social media. Do you think that it connects people, or you think the concern is, or are you concerned that it's harmful? Bottled water. Is it about convenience, or are you more concerned about the environmental impact? This is a fun, maybe a little lighter discussion depending on your level of attachment. Which is a better pet, cats or dogs? Teaching cursive, is it necessary in this age of computers? I know we have a lot of educators in here who might have a perspective on that one. And lastly, saving energy. Will people of their own accord choose to reduce their energy consumption, or should we have more passive means available, like only selling Energy Star appliances, having no plastic bags available at grocery stores, having designated times to do laundry and wash dishes and run the dishwasher? So what I'd like you to do now is pair up with someone, and we'll do that first. Go ahead and raise your hand when you are properly paired, so I know.
And I'm just going to make an announcement to the folks in Zoom land that
Yeah.
we're going to allow you to unmute and turn on your videos, and we're going to provide a breakout meeting for you. So.
Thank you. All right. Oh, you don't necessarily. You pair up with someone first, and then you go from there. Okay, thank you for asking that question. So the question was, how do you find someone who wants to talk about the same topic? And you don't. You just pair up with someone first, and then you discuss which topic. Is everyone, all right? We'll take the next minute then to decide which topic. So I'm going to give you 1 minute right now. Fifteen more seconds to decide your topic. All right. Now you each have 2 minutes to share your viewpoint on that topic. I will let you know when 2 minutes is up, so then the next person has a turn. If you haven't switched yet, go ahead and switch. The next person gets 2 minutes, or you have 2 more minutes of dialogue. 30 more seconds. All right, we'll bring that to a close. We'll wrap that up right now. And now for the next minute, I'd like you to talk about how that went, a little debrief with each other. How did that go? 1 minute on that. All right, let's bring that to a close. We're going to wrap up. We're going to find our original seats in the sanctuary as we resume this service. And it's so hard for everybody to do, I can see that. All right, wrapping it up, going back to our seats. You're done. No, well, we got it. So I hope you found that helpful and enjoyable, and I hope you got to know each other in a little different way. Civil conversations take practice. Sometimes it doesn't go as well as we'd like. Keep at it. It will get better over time. Civil Conversation monthly gathering will take a break in the summer. We'll meet again in September, so look for notice of that in the newsletter. Let's make the bold move over the summer to keep the conversation going, to build the beloved community one conversation at a time. We'll share our experiences in September. Thank you.